On your bike, next stop. Anyway, thanks a lot. Thanks for your questions and the opportunity to. Oh, I got a bit sort of ideological there.
So.
Hang on, are we starting? Sorry, are we starting? Just to be clear. Okay, right.
So
you can introduce yourselves.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Christiana. I'm a student. I study international European studies here in Athens, and I would like to know what is your role, why are you here, and if you would like to tell us some things about you, and how did you start to work in EU, and why did you make this decision?
Okay, so how long do we have? Because there's a lot of questions there.
Okay.
To start with, my name is Stephen Clark. I'm British, and I've been working in the European Parliament now since 1991, so that's a fair stretch. It's 29 years. Done a lot of things in my career, but I've been in communications since 2007. Firstly, it was the digital side of things. So we launched then the first Facebook page of the European Parliament. It was all exciting back in 2009. Since then, I've done different things, including coordinating the campaigns on the elections that we've done the last couple of occasions, which has been fascinating and really shown how things are changing over the years. And right now, my job is to be, I'm in charge of the office that Parliament has in every country. So in every country, in every capital city in EU countries, we have an office. And in some of the big countries, we have a second office, a regional office too. And I'm sort of in charge of them and coordinating what they do, making sure they're sort of plugged into the strategy that we have centrally, and also getting their feedback about what's going on locally. So the reason I'm in Athens today is to visit the office and to have a look at what's going on here, try and understand it better myself, try and contribute a little bit perhaps while I'm here too. And I do this in fact everywhere. So a week ago I was in London for a rather sad moment. The actual moment of Brexit was, but we had an event there to sort of mark the occasion and tell people that we were continuing to be present in London. So that's my job basically, and it's about implementing, communications for the European Parliament, it's a fascinating job. It's a political institution, it's a pluralist institution, but we are the administration of the Parliament, and our job is to sort of, get across the messages of the Parliament as a whole, as an institution, what it stands for, what it's all about, what's going on, help people and just understand what's happening in Brussels, because sometimes it can be a bit distant. So there's part of our job is just, as it were, providing information and access, and part of it is sort of telling stories and getting people involved, because democracy works when people are involved. So that's partly our job too. I'll stop there, otherwise I'll go on forever.
Okay. My name is Δημήτρη Σταυριανάκη. I'm student of Political Science Public Administration. And actually, I agree with your statement that democracy is a matter of citizens, that they must get involved and be informed about the European Union totally. My question is very clear. It's a matter of cohesion and solidarity. Cohesion and solidarity is some of the most popular values in European Union. During all those years of your careers, 29 years of your careers, you've managed to cooperate with 27 countries to the European Union. Have you seen practically that solidarity and cohesion amongst institutions and the state members have worked effectively, whether we have some challenges during the economic crisis, we have lots of crises, or there are some steps that must have been done in order to improve our cohesion, our communication among us? Do you think it's very satisfied, this effort?
Well, I mean, there have been ups and downs, of course. When I started, say, 29 years ago, I joined the European Parliament's administration at a time when, the EU had a sort of inevitability. It was progressing all the time. It was the era of Jacques Delors, and monetary union was coming, and the customs, the single market was created, customs barriers disappeared. All of these things was still happening then, and it seemed like that was an inevitable process, and everything was going fine. I suppose there were early signs of difficulties when the Maastricht Treaty, if you recall, was rejected in a couple of referendums in different countries, and obviously in recent years we've been through some pretty tough times. Basically from 2008 with the financial crisis, which of course hit here, I think, harder than anywhere else, but it basically hit all of Europe, and it changed people's views, and it actually made people ask questions about Europe to an extent that was not done before. I think, people were sort of happy for things to carry on before, and then suddenly realised, hang on a minute, this Europe has a real direct impact on our lives, and they didn't necessarily like every part of that. So it's been tough, and it's led to a sort of political situation which is more complicated, where there are challenges to what you might call the orthodox view of Europe, or even the orthodox view of democracy. And in a way, that has helped the European Union to react as well. And I think that's what's been happening. What we saw happening in the last election campaign was a lot of people, and I'm not talking about institutions or officials of the union or even elected people in the union, I'm talking about everyday people saying, hang on a minute, there's something here that's important we need to stand up for. And that gave us this mobilization we saw of people saying, yes, this time I'm voting, and yes, I want to help convince my friends. And what we saw, and this was incredibly encouraging, was this increase in turnout in the elections, but disproportionately so amongst younger people who feel, I think, a degree of commitment to this whole idea. Now, you talk about solidarity and cohesion and what practical signs we see of that. Europe is a very different place. When I was, I guess, around your age, when I was a student, travelling was more complicated. You had different currencies everywhere you went. I remember I used to go a lot to Italy. That was I was studying Italian, and I had a little bag with like 5 or 6 different currencies in it just to do the journey to Italy. And all of that has gone. And in fact, we have come together. We don't realise actually now, and I think maybe in your generation you haven't experienced it, so you don't recall how much we have assimilated, and life has become more flexible, or it's easier to go and live and work abroad, and all those opportunities are there that weren't necessarily there before. That said, solidarity, this word came up a lot in the financial crisis as well, and what does it mean in practice? It means not only helping each other, it also means there are sacrifices to be made as well, and those were politically quite tough to digest. I think now, as hopefully we sort of emerge from the worst of it and we look back, we'll say, well, it was tough, but it actually made us stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as they say. Perhaps the Brits are the exception that proves the rule. They actually got killed off in this process somehow. But I'm hoping that we have actually, under all the Sturm und Drang, all the political fighting, under that we have a sort of cohesion that we didn't have before, and I think it is genuinely there. Sorry, that was a long answer, but get me going on a subject like that. Who's next?
Okay. I would like to know about the campaign, this time I'm voting now, it's Together You, and how it was your idea, right? No?
Well, I can't claim exclusive paternity, but all ideas, everyone wants to be the father of every idea or the mother.
How do you form this campaign?
Okay.
And what was the result?
Well, I think firstly the political atmosphere we had, and the sort of the aggravation of this sort of period of crisis was, I think, a driving force. One thing I think, and I'm not talking about myself, although I include myself, it was time for the European institutions to take a stand. And this came from our political authorities. When we had a mandate to go and organise an election campaign, they said to us, this time it's going to be a bit different. We want you to sort of stand up for European values. This is a campaign which is in favour of Europe. It's in favour of this European democracy that we have, and is to some extent under threat. And that was, I think, a very important starting point. And for us, when as sort of professional communicators, we were looking at how do we do this campaign, we looked around, of course, as you do, and we looked at many interesting examples. We looked at the UK referendum on Brexit, which, in terms of the campaigns, was fascinating. Both the Leave campaigns and the Remain campaigns. And what we're discovering about those campaigns now, it makes them even more interesting and even more, perhaps in some respects, questionable. There was the American, the US presidential campaign, the last one. There was the French presidential campaign. There were lots of campaigns. And all of this told us something was changing in this world of campaigning. It was not about putting up billboards and doing TV ads. It was about mobilizing people. And mobilizing people behind a message or a cause, something emotionally engaging. So if you look at Donald Trump, Make America Great Again, or the Brexit Leave campaign, Let's Take Back Control, or to take another example, perhaps not as, from our point of view, not as negative as those, the French one, La République en marche, we're on the march. So these are not sort of carefully crafted policy positions. They're slogans, they're emotional messages, they're about getting people together. They break across the sort of traditional loyalties. And we thought, hang on, we need to do something a bit like that. We need to be working with other people. People don't trust institutions, politicians, experts, all of these things. You remember this was said a lot at the time. No one's interested in listening to experts anymore. They want to listen to people who are like them, people they trust, people who they identify with. And again, this was another reason for us to say it's about who we can mobilize to sort of share the message with us. And the message should be simple, it should be emotionally engaging, and we came up with this thing, This Time I'm Voting, which is, behind it, it acknowledges lots of things. This time, so maybe last time I didn't, right? I'm voting. It's easy, it's translatable, it means something, and it's about democracy, it's about participation. And what we saw was, in different ways, and not necessarily in the ways we expected, this was picked up. It was picked up by organisations, it was picked up by individuals, it was picked up by volunteers who signed up, such as yourselves, I think, but it was picked up, even by large corporates. At the end of the campaign, Lufthansa were painting a plane with a pro-voting message. We didn't ask them, but this was happening. There was kind of something happened. And I think it was all to do with this realisation that it was time to make a stand. And a lot of people shared that feeling. And this gave us, all of us, the result that we saw in the election, which was an increased turnout, an increased participation of the young, arguably too a certain sort of political outcome. If you recall, at one point the doomsayers were saying, okay, this is the end, the nationalists and the anti-Europeans are going to take over the parliament, and that's the end of the European Union. This did not happen, in fact. It's a more pluralistic parliament, perhaps. It's not swung brutally to that side. It in fact has a strong pro-European majority, and it's operating on that basis. So this was a really fascinating campaign to be in. It's not the end of the story, of course, because now it has to deliver. The whole political setup, the Commission, the Parliament, the Council, everyone. The promises are there, they've been made, now they've got to be delivered on. Okay. Again, a long answer.
Well, so my next and I suppose last question from me is that last year in Greece it was a year of elections. We had national elections, European elections. While we were running the campaign of This Time I'm Voting here in Greece of European elections, personally, the message that I received, and I was trying to persuade many young people for this campaign, is let's make an effort in order to restore our trustful relationship with European Union. Because except for tough times and many problems that we have, of course there are many privileges, such as you said before, easy to travel all over the European Union, European youth card. So I suppose that from the results of the elections we have done a great start. But now that we show that we are active, we want to give a chance more in order to fix many things, in order to improve and make tremendous progress to many other situations. Can you predict the situation of Europe in 10 years now that you see that people take situations in their hands and be more active?
No one can predict Europe 10 years from now, but I'm optimistic. I mean, there are many difficulties ahead, and there are many challenges, and I think, as we all know, climate change is kind of the big one for the planet, and maybe in 10 years we'll know a lot more about that, one way or another, I hope in a good way. But what for me is extremely encouraging is this sense that volunteers mobilised, and the level of participation of young people in the whole process went up. And I'm not only talking about voting. In Greece, I believe, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, that the youth turnout was higher than the overall turnout. People are nodding around the room. That's true. I thought it was, but I was just hedging against being wrong. Yeah, and that is actually extraordinary. When you think that just about everywhere in the world, youth turnout tends to be about half of the general overall turnout. So Greek youth seems to have got it, that the future is in their hands and they have to take it in their hands. Now, that is one sign of that happening, the fact of participating in an election, but there is so much more that people can do to participate in the political process and make it theirs. That's what ultimately the democracy is all about. People have been elected, but those people now have to be held to account, they have to be questioned, they have to be pushed. That's what they're there for, that's their job. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that. If the volunteers who joined the campaign, and people like them, want to continue in that sort of role, then it's our job as the European Parliament to help that process, to encourage it, to support it, to nurture it. And that means concrete things. And we've been doing an exercise recently with our supporters and volunteers in the campaign, asking them, what do you want to do now? What do you need from us? And one of the replies is, well, two things come through very strongly. We want content, we want hard facts, we want to know, we want to be able to tell people, like our friends, our communities, our audiences, whatever they might be, on your radio station or in a school conference room or whatever it might be, you want to tell them what this whole European Union thing is actually all about and what it does for us. You know, what actually does it change and impact? And that we need to be able to supply answers to that question. And we've tried to do so during the campaign, and we have to continue to do so. The second thing that people ask us for is training or skills, if I can put it a bit more broadly. Like, you know, just give us a few pointers on how to organise ourselves, how to maybe set up an event, how to, but maybe some of this stuff you don't need to be told, but you know, some people, they say, give us help with, you know, just to start us off with our web radio or our web TV or our Europe-wide network of volunteers or whatever it might be. And we can help with those things. So that's what we want to do. Now, if we deliver and if that energy remains, then that's a strong reason to be optimistic for in 10 years that Europe will be a better place. And I don't want to sound sort of over-idealistic, but it's in our hands. And Europe is, it's in some respects, if you look around the world as a whole, it's a holdout. You know, things internationally are taking a turn which is not necessarily in line with our values as Europeans, and we have to make sure that we stand up for our values. And that's why all of this is so important.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's a pleasure. Any more for any more? It's open season, you just have a go.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you, by the time of the referendum of 23rd of June on Brexit until the 31st of January, what is the level of difficulty of the communication management of the process for the European Union, for the members, and for the United Kingdom, and for you personally, please?
Well, yeah, this, of course, I was, on the 23rd of June 2016, I was stunned badly, in a bad way, by the result, and I think a lot of people were. It was even the most authoritative polls in the country and everything were all predicting that the Remain side would win. There were some people, I think, including people I know, who had a bad feeling about it and said, hang on, there's something else which is deeper here, which is going on, which could change that, and that indeed is what we saw. There was, I have to say, a feeling of disbelief and shock the day after. But then that was, of course, then the process always takes over, and the process was incredibly complicated because, of course, this thing called Brexit had been voted for, but no one really knew what it was, including Mrs. May, who said Brexit is Brexit. Brexit means Brexit. But even that doesn't enlighten you very much about what it actually means. Is it Brexit on Norway-style conditions, or is it Brexit on North Korea-style conditions? What degree of alignment is there? Anyway, these questions are starting to be answered now, even though even now they're not answered, because we still don't really know where we're going, but we know the broad positions of the two sides. Communicating, now I'm going to say something which may seem paradoxical to you. In some ways, it became easier. In continental Europe, or the rest of Europe, the 27 other member states, there was, if you look at the polling, there was a clear little uptick in support for the European Union. When people saw what had happened, they thought, oh, don't want that to happen here. And suddenly we saw even quite radical politicians who'd been calling for the exit of their respective countries from the European Union stopped saying it because they just saw, oh, wow, this could actually happen, and it does, then there's trouble. So as we approached the elections in 2019, in fact, there was maybe a point at which public opinion started to turn somewhat in the rest of Europe. Another paradox is that the UK now has the biggest and most dynamic, active and forceful pro-European movement of any European country. I know because I've been there and I've seen it in action, and it was quite extraordinary. If anyone would have told me before 2016 that you would see 1 million Brits marching through London 3 times over to support the membership of the European Union, I'd have thought you were completely insane. But that happened, and I was there, so I know it happened. And it goes to show that when you understand what you might be losing, then suddenly that thing is more precious to you. And that happened in the UK, even if at the end of the day we have the Brexit happened. The reason it happened is very complicated, and it's not just a straight considered opinion on the benefits and disadvantages of membership of the European Union. It's a whole sort of, it's identity politics gone mad, it's social divisions, it's political divisions of the sort that we've seen almost everywhere recently in what you might call the democratic world. So all of these things mean we're in a different sort of politics. So the question that you asked about communicating in this environment, it's a totally different environment. And what I said about appealing to people's emotions, the breakdown of the old party system or old party allegiances, the importance of getting people to get behind a cause and be active themselves, all of these things are linked to this mood that brought about Brexit. The shift in politics away from what you might call traditional ideological left-right politics into this more sort of identity politics, which is not as open to rational argument as perhaps the previous form of politics was. That's a little personal theory, but I think I've heard a lot of people also say those kind of things. So when we were communicating, we had to do so in that environment. It's a very shouty environment. It's an environment where people who disagree with you often do so quite unpleasantly and strongly. You have to be able to accept that. You have to be able to live with it, and you have to be able to sort of be in that game, which means asserting your own voice as well. On top of all of that, if I can mention it, disinformation, what we call fake news, has become a factor at the level, I mean, it's always existed, but now with the technology that exists, it's so much more powerful and invasive into public discourse, and another factor which disrupts, if you like, the old form of civilized argument you might expect to have in politics. So, from all those points of view, Brexit and the reasons for Brexit have completely transformed the environment in which we work. On a personal level, people always ask me this. I'm British. I have actually no other origins that I can detect anywhere in my family. I've always been someone who supported kind of the European idea. Perhaps it was because I was interested in studying languages when I was younger. That's what I did at university. So this, for me, is really quite hard to take. If you devote your professional life to something, then it's not a pleasant experience when, you know, your compatriots say, but that was a waste of time. We should never have done that. And of course, I don't take it that way, but you know, there is that feeling somewhere inside you that it's a disappointment. Nevertheless, I also see myself, and I'm pleased to say that my employer sees it the same way, that I'm a European. I haven't stopped being a European because of what's happened in the UK politically. I became an official of the European Union many years ago. I left my passport at the door, as they say, like we all do. We still have the country we know best, is the phrase that we use in our internal jargon. But we work for Europe, we don't work for our own countries directly in that way. So I will continue to fight for this thing that I believe in. And I do that through my job, as we all do.
Great.